Hello everyone, and welcome to this audio podcast. This audio podcast is part of the Percolation. This audio podcast is part of the Bostics and Torpedo and the Specials. This audio podcast is part of the Spectre and Newsflash, and this audio podcast is part of a Storm Robotics production. Through this audio podcast, a look at sort of some of the advantages and disadvantages of some of the the some of the advantages and disadvantages on the bacterial identification modalities, and where Hussain has had actually had taken had identified through the literature in amongst their works a sort of a where there are sort of advantages and disadvantages in the use of particular investigations in around in around as part of the diagnoses of osteomyelitis, and and in around and in around and in around S aureus. So one of the main sort of bacterial identification methodologies or laboratory investigations can be conventional, for example, conventional culturing and biochemical tests or investigations such as phenotypic, that are linked to where within laboratory the where laboratory teams would use particular investigations to determine phenotypic identification of bacterial infection. The advantages are and can include where, for example, they're sent where conventional cultural biochemical investigations are sensitive and they tend to be inexpensive. But the disadvantage is that they are time consuming. Secondly, in around bacterial identification methodology, there's real-time PCR, which can help determine a genotypic identification, and at sort of genotypic level. The advantage is that it's specific, is that investigations are specific and sensitive, highly accurate, and also rapid. But the disadvantage is that only trained personnel can perform, for example, PCR investigations or polymerase chain reaction sort of investigations. And secondly, one of the disadvantages is that investigations can be costly. Thirdly, in around about a bacterial identification modality or methodology, there's whole genome sequencing, and much like real-time PCR, the investigations can help determine at genotypic level. The advantages is that investigations at WGS or whole genome sequencing can help identify fastidious microorganisms that may be difficult to cultivate. And one of the disadvantages, or some of the disadvantages, can include that bioinformatics software may be required, some of the investigations, or through some of the aspects or elements in around WGS, is that it can be costly, and trained personnel are required, or would be required, to perform investigations, and at the same time, WGS whole genome sequencing may not be viable as part of clinical sort of clinical diagnoses in amongst for example, to determine osteomyelitis, or infection in and around osteomyelitis sort of in amongst all as part of all laboratory sort of as part of all laboratory sort of investigations investigations, and for clinicians to form sort of diagnoses. So therefore, again, where WGS may not be suitable for amongst all clinical sort of investigations. As part of clinical diagnoses. Additionally, there's investigations called microassays, which can help determine bacterial infection at genotypic level. Again, the advantage in around this is that large-scale screening can simultaneously help diagnose and detect sort of a vast sort of basis of varying pathogens. And some of the disadvantages that bioinformatic software interpretation may be required, or is required, can be costly, and again, specialist personnel or laboratory personnel may be needed to perform investigations. And then in around bacterial methodology, there's the MALDI-TOF, which is some of the advantages is include that there's rapid and accurate identification can be attained. It's less expensive than, for example, molecular investigations or molecular detection, and thirdly, it's automated, so the investigation is sort of automated to an extent, but at the same time, this can also mean that trained personnel or laboratory specialists, for example, are not often required for the implementation of MALDI-TOF investigation. Some of the disadvantages is that a high initial sort of investment of MALDI-TOF equipment is and can be required. That draws this audio podcast to a close. This audio podcast as part of the Percolation. This audio podcast is part of a Bostick's Torpedo and the Specials. This audio podcast is part of a Spectre and Newsflash, and this audio podcast as part of a Storm Lobostics production.